Welcome to Chevrons, a podcast for the enlisted force. I'm Senior Airman Juliet Hasey, and today on the podcast we're going to be talking about holiday resiliency. How do we take care of ourselves during the holiday season? How do we identify our triggers? How do we set boundaries? And how do we take care of ourselves if we're overseas for the first time during the holiday season? On this episode, we're going to have a wonderful conversation with Erin Faye. She's the Military and Family Readiness Program Manager for the Massachusetts Air National Guard, and she gives great personal and professional advice about what we can do with all these emotions and how we can make the best of this time, and identify what we need and how to take care of ourselves. While we discuss how we all stay resilient during this time at home, we also talk about the additional and very different struggles that service members who are deployed face, as well as their families. If you like this episode, be sure to subscribe and follow us along on social media at chevrons.podcast. Email us your thoughts at chevrons.podcast@gmail.com. Now, without further ado, let's get into the episode. Erin, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So to get started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the work you do?
Absolutely. I am the Airman and Family Readiness Program Manager, and working in military and family readiness for over 20 years. I come with a background in sociology and have had the luxury and really afforded lots of great opportunities to have education in all the aspects that military and family readiness provides throughout the DoD.
Awesome. So today we're going to talk a little bit about holiday resiliency, and I'd love to hear any advice and guidance that you have from your personal experience, your professional experience, because as we know, the holiday season's coming up, and it brings up a lot of emotions, both challenging and exciting, and it's hard to navigate that, and it's always good to get prepared for it. And we want to talk about how you stay resilient at home for those who are stationed at home, but as well as those who are deployed, and all the unique challenges that come with that. So I'd like to kind of talk about both.
Okay, terrific.
Yeah. So to get started, as I just said, the holidays can trigger many emotions, including challenging ones. And these emotions can often cause people to react poorly or a way that they don't prefer to. What is the best way to kind of respond to these challenging emotions?
I think self-awareness is the first thing that is in your toolbox.
Right.
That should be the first thing. If you have recognized that perhaps you haven't been your best person in holidays before, or there are going to be things that are going to set yourself up for making choices that aren't ideal to you, that you recognize that and then go ahead and say, all right, how do I want to make this different? Why do I want to make this different? When you had spoke before about mobilizations and deployments, when we look at this at a deployment section, are you the family staying home? What are your expectations? And if you're the family member that's away, what kind of things are you missing? And then how emotionally are you dealing with that? Military and family readiness, financial is very much a big piece of what we do. How do you use your finances? How do you plan ahead to make the expectation and your realities not cause more stress? So I think looking at all those different pieces of the kind of work that we do, a lot of those things come in, and the better prepared you are and honest with yourself, the better you come out of the holidays with honest enjoyment versus regretful emotions.
And that was great advice, and I'd love to just break down everything that you said in that statement, because a lot of it is very complicated and hard to navigate and understand. But firstly, let's talk specifically about deployers. What are some of the unique challenges that deployers might be facing who are away from their family and their friends for the holidays?
Sometimes this is the first time families have really been away, and for a military member overseas, it might be that longing for that one specific thing that someone makes for a holiday. Right. That really ties in, and the smells and the feelings. How do you recreate those to make sure that that energy why you really celebrate a holiday is to bring together and make that community, and that reinforcement helps us go through the dark days of winter. So how do you recreate those if you're far away? If you're a military mom and your child's gone, How are you still a mom if your kid's not there?
Right.
And how does that look the same? And how do you make sure they're present? So creating that new maybe tradition or keeping up traditions while still honoring them and keeping them present is a big thing. For children in the holidays, where we know there's only so many times while they're small that you get to make these memories, again, how do you meet the expectation as a parent to make sure they're having these good times? And that goes for both sides, either if you are the one not home or you are the one home. How do you make this memorable and strong and something that they can take forward with them?
And going off of that, I have kind of a unique experience. I'm in the military, and also I'm a military kid. So I grew up with two parents in the military who have both been deployed during the holidays. And then also a couple years ago, I was away for the holidays as well while I was at training during Thanksgiving and the holiday, the Christmas time. That's what I celebrate. So seeing it from both perspectives, I kind of understand the challenges. I mean, I don't have children, so I'm sure my parents went through a lot of things that I might one day understand, but there's so many different unique obstacles and challenges that we all face that you don't even think of until you're in the moment.
Honoring emotions is the most important thing to start with.
Right.
If you feel guilty about being happy, those are really mixed emotions. How am I here on this glorious morning? I've made all these plans for my child, and here is this day. And you said you celebrate Christmas, so we'll use that as our baseline.
Sure.
We're opening up presents and we're having a really great time, but our person isn't here. Is it okay to feel good?
Right.
Of course it's okay to feel good. You can also feel sad and loss and grief that it's not exactly the same, but you also want to be able to say, in the world of change and growth, things can be different, and we can still have enjoyment and go ahead with them. There can be resentment, there can be hostility, and being able to accept all of those and take them for their face value, but really say what you want. And I'm very passionate about goal setting as far as what your intention is. I want to have a holiday that includes my family with positive memories. That can be your simple goal.
Right.
And anything beyond that can be really fantastic. And sometimes with that, I understand that I'm going to feel negative emotions. I want to deal with them positively. And that could be writing a letter. That could be telling a story and keeping that person there with them. Sometimes you can FaceTime and bring them in as much as possible. What you don't want to do is fall on negative behaviors. So if you're feeling that anxiety and when you feel upset, you tend to overeat.
Right.
Okay, let's not do that. I feel guilty that they're not there. I'm going to overspend. We don't want to do that. I know that when my family comes over and there's going to be questions about it and maybe negative, maybe I'll overdrink. Okay, so we're not going to want to do that. How are we going to set ourselves up for, one, trying to protect ourselves against those behaviors, and then two, giving us some grace in case we don't exactly handle them well, right, and then have expectations that are realistic.
So that's a great point. And going off of that, kind of talking about those behaviors that might come out in reaction to the emotions that we're having. I did some research, and from personal experience too, there tends to be three common reactions that people might have that aren't the best. And I kind of want to go through them and see if you have any advice and guidance about them.
Absolutely.
So first, many's first instinct is just to shut down. When they're feeling those emotions, they don't want to handle them. They don't want them to come out. They don't really know what to do with it. What is your advice for someone who tends to shut down?
When you shut down, it is avoidance.
Right.
And so that's also part of when you overuse alcohol, mm-hmm, and whatever that running away is. So really giving yourself patience and grace is the first thing. Acknowledging that you're having negative feelings and creating a path of what you want. I don't want to face them. I want to hide. Okay, that might be your feeling, right? I don't want to do this, therefore I am going to do this. And then realizing in that patterned behavior how that makes you feel in the end. So, okay, that's not the expectation. I stayed away and then I was miserable all day. Or that turned into a big hostile fight and I don't want to do that either. I would rather have, and then go back to that goal. Go back to that, I want a simple day with positive for my family. Sometimes it's being able to take small interludes in. It's okay to remember your boundaries are important. So if you're avoiding something because maybe you have porous boundaries or someone doesn't respect your boundaries, it's important to know what your boundaries are, stick with them and be healthy about them and accept, yes, I understand that potentially this person doesn't respect my boundaries. I will tell them I do not want to talk about that. And then you can just continue in a different direction. And every comment doesn't need to be reacted to, you know, and having that space to say, is this going to be productive or is this going to bring me in a direction I don't want? And then say, I'm worth more than that. And really being able to say that to yourself is extremely helpful in why you might wanting to avoid the situation you want to, and understanding and getting some of those. And then practicing saying no to something. If that's, let's say you're a yes person, you know, or you're reactionary, ask your friends or someone else to kind of role play with you and be like, hey, you know what? I am really nervous about Thanksgiving. My aunt tends to tell me, why aren't I married and have children? Right? So then I go do this and I, pick on somebody else and then the fight starts. It's really the story of like what happens right before this fight starts,
right.
And this is typically the system. And when we look at family dynamics, a lot of those system plays, when you do one thing and change, it's triangulation, and they will try to keep you in that pattern. And if the pattern isn't working, how you break it. And that is sort of not following the normal. So when your aunt says, well, dear, you're so beautiful and you're so successful, and why aren't you married and having children? Because that will make you just whole. And you can say, thank you for that. Right. I'll take that under consideration, and then continue on.
Right.
And you don't have to acknowledge, and you don't have to answer every question that's given to you, and that's your right and that's your boundary.
Right. And I've found that pushing those emotions down or ignoring them or pretending like they don't exist causes people and myself to overreact to many things just because I haven't addressed those emotions. I don't know what I'm feeling, and I'm holding resentment because I haven't addressed it. So it's easy to overreact or react poorly in an instinct when you don't really understand what your emotions are, or you pretend like they don't exist.
Yeah, putting the name to the emotions are hard. Most of us have seen those cards where they have the little faces of all the different emotions, right. And sometimes there's maybe like 12 emotions. But when you see the comprehensive ones where there's 36 emotions, you're like, oh, that's the nuanced sort of thing. And right. Even looking at that and being able to say, oh, that's what I'm feeling. Okay. And why is what they're saying bothering me? Mm-hmm. And it's usually things like wanting love and approval, or maybe second guessing yourself for not being confident. Right. And so if you're thinking that someone that you love is potentially looking down on you or questioning something underneath, yeah, I think that's reasonable to have a negative feeling attached to that. Right. But is it true, or does it have validity, or does it even matter to you? If that's their test of how valuable you are, is that really the test of how you feel value?
Right. Identifying why things make you feel that way and address it maybe before the holidays if you can, or at least prepare yourself for those conversations that might happen.
Yes.
Next, I kind of want to talk about isolation. That sometimes is a reaction to feeling these emotions. You address those emotions, but you hide. You don't find that community. You try to handle them yourself, and that can be harmful in a few ways. Mm-hmm. What is the best way to handle that if that's what we're feeling like we need to do?
Finding someone you want to be with. I think being self-isolation can be really damaging because you're penalizing yourself for it. It is a sort of way of avoidance where I don't know what else. Knowing your community, your friends, your family of choice.
Right.
And why you might want to do that. We all have different kinds of friends, and why we have different kinds of friends is because they're all going to have something that hopefully we admire. And then when we ask them questions, I want to go to, let's say, someone because they write well, and I want them to edit my piece before I submit it somewhere. Or I want to talk to, I'm going to have a difficult conversation. I'm going to talk to the director of psychological health and then come up with some things. So when you surround yourself with different people, it is that what you want. And if you want to be nurtured and loved, who makes you feel that way? And sometimes taking having a conversation, like, what are you doing for the holidays? And then when they ask you back, you're like, I don't know. And then see if you can join them. Right. Or a way you can maybe do something different. There are lots of community organizations that do things throughout the holidays, as well as volunteering, coming out of your comfort zone and doing different things for other people. Military is an organization of service, and we have people who love to do things for other folks, and how you can do that maybe in a different way, and the holiday being something that is really giving, which is the base of a lot of what we do in holiday celebrations.
Right. In my experience, when I was away during the holidays, I found many of my friends were isolating. They would either be in their rooms more than usual, or they wouldn't be out while we're doing big events or communities or hanging out. And I find that when you're in a deployed location or you're away during the holidays, you might not have that community yet if you've only been there for a few months, or you're not sure where to look. Do you have any advice for what to do when you're away and you don't know who to go to?
This is going to be a lean forward. This is definitely going to be a keep your eyes and ears. This is why we teach resilience and teach understanding about how to be resourceful. So when you are faced somewhere where potentially you don't know a lot of people, how are you going to go ask?
Right.
How are you going to be the one to instigate something if you're not an instigator of fun things or getting together? This is when understanding personality types is really important, because if you are an introvert, it would be harder sometimes maybe, or an extrovert that has a introverted tendencies. Sometimes those kind of questions are hard. Other times for other people, they're not hard at all.
Right.
So really knowing again, going back to the knowing yourself is really the big piece. And then what it might be. Because sometimes one person can make the best time. Just one person with you. And you're like, hey, I remember that time, and that person and I did something weird, and it was great.
Right.
And it's one of my most fond memories. And then other times it's getting lost in folks is nice. So it depends. You have to look at yourself and see what's around and take those opportunities to either lean forward or do that research.
Right. And while I was away, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have different experiences, but I find people that you wouldn't think you would get along with, or you don't have any similarities with. And sometimes that's the best connections and the best friendships, just being open to everyone and in all conversations and leaning forward. And I'm not so shy now, but I grew up very shy, and that was hard for me. But once I did it a little bit more, it got more comfortable. Yeah.
Finding those people that meet your eye, that smile, that say hello. If that is a challenge for you, if that's something you haven't done, is a good way to start. The people that are willing to make that eye contact. And if you are someone who is more gregarious and finds it naturally easier or has developed that skill, to be on the lookout to build community for the people who maybe aren't that way, and you see them isolating, and then being able to bring them into the fold and make sure that they're connected.
Yeah.
That's a great way to create positive environment through your own actions.
Right. And then another reaction, lastly, that people might have to their emotions is getting a little aggressive or frustrated or irritable, especially when you're holding on to those emotions or don't know what to do with them. What advice do you have for someone who might become irritable during the holidays because of these emotions, and how should they prepare themselves or manage those emotions?
It's terrific if you already know ahead of time. And then it would be a really great thing to explore, potentially with support.
Right.
So calling out to folks and seeing maybe if you want to talk to mental health clinicians, not necessarily ahead of the holiday, but as you look forward to January, we all set resolutions. The resolutions don't have to start in January, though.
Right.
They can start ahead of time. They can say, okay, you know what? This year, I'm going to make sure that I deal with this. And getting ahead of that by using the tools. There's lots of apps online. There's lots of resources around that are available that you can say, okay, how am I going to not fall into this that, again, doesn't serve me? And
Right.
really valuing yourself and the pieces that come along with that. And once you dig into the bottom, the root is exposed, and then whatever growth that is sapping away from your energy will be able to be trimmed and pruned and die off, and then all the good things can grow.
Yeah. I know that many people, including myself in the past, have felt guilty or I didn't like that emotions did arise. I didn't like getting emotional.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I was being overdramatic or irrational or just too emotional. And like you said, a lot of the times addressing those emotions and giving yourself grace is exactly what you need.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like you to talk about that a little bit more. How do we give ourselves grace when these emotions arise? How do we make ourselves feel okay that it is okay to have emotions, they're human, and lean into that so that we do have better reactions and we take care of ourselves better?
I like to pretend I'm talking to someone else. So let's say you're talking to yourself, and you're negatively speaking. Like, oh, I can't believe I feel that bad about that, or that made me so angry. And what happens if somebody else was saying it to you?
Right.
How would you treat them? I had a really good friend who was doing a lot of negative self-talk. And when they would say, oh, I'm so stupid, and I would plainly say, please don't speak that way about my friend. I don't appreciate it. And even though that person was talking about themselves, it stopped the conversation and made it a point where it was aware that this wasn't a kind thing to do to someone else nor yourself. And using that same tactic, you can give yourself space. If someone else was saying this, how would I feel? Would I be kind, or would I be blameful? Would I be understanding if I knew the whole picture? So if there was a negative reaction at somebody that, I've done something that I'm not proud of numerous years ago, and it continues to be brought up. And then if my friend told me that happened, and they keep bringing it up at the table, and then they get angry. And I said, well, I would feel the same way. I would feel upset that they haven't seen my growth beyond my mistakes. And to understand that you are far more than your worst choice. You are your best choice. You are always striving to get better. And just because just because a car is stopped doesn't mean it can't go.
Right.
The car rides fine. And yeah, sometimes it gets stuck in traffic. Sometimes it can't go to its full potential because of other things around it. So let's look at it and say to yourself, given that context, that seems pretty reasonable. We can probably have a better reaction, and let's figure out a better way to do it.
Right.
And treat yourself like a friend.
Similarly, I found it helpful to, when I'm feeling those emotions or have a lot of that negative self-talk, think about talking to my younger self.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was younger, I didn't really understand the emotions I was feeling, didn't know how to handle them, ran away or just reacted poorly. And I kind of think of when I'm having those thoughts, oh, you're being too emotional, you're being too dramatic, that shouldn't make you that upset, that shouldn't bother you. I think about if my younger self was saying that to me and how I would comfort them, and it helps you kind of take yourself out of your own body and kind of look at the whole situation and understand why you're feeling that way and what you need in that moment.
Yeah. And understanding that emotions, we're very complex organisms,
Right.
and we have those emotions for survival. So there's something rooted in them that is true. Whatever happened to get you there, your body's having a negative reaction. So is there overreacting? That's a societal judgment. That is not a biological, that caused me fear, and therefore chemically, all these chemicals are changing in my body and in creating this. There's a reason that's there. That's because it was threatening or because it was unpleasant, and your body's trained to remember unpleasant things so that you don't do it again. Right. And getting to the resolve of that. And I just absolutely love looking back and the ability to tell your younger self, like, hey, you know what? You did the best with what you did.
Right.
You knew with what you knew at the time, in your capacity, you did what you did.
Right.
Now it's time to make a different decision and forgive.
Right. Give yourself some grace.
Mm-hmm.
Next, I kind of want to talk about triggers.
Mm-hmm.
How do we identify our triggers, and what's the best way to find out what's really making us feel a certain way?
Mm-hmm. One of the number one things is to make sure that we have sleep to deal with anything. So making sure you're taking care of your individual emotional and biological needs. Sleep and eat and drink water. Mm-hmm. So those are the core things. A lot of times we're, I'm going to run and do this and I'm going to go run and do that. And we spread ourselves really thin. And then it's the end of the calendar year. And I'm on vacation and I have to shove all this stuff in. And maybe we're not taking care of ourselves as well as we could. And therefore we don't deal with things as well as we could.
Right.
So one, making sure we're putting ourselves first and giving ourselves reasonable expectations.
Mm-hmm.
So that will help you deal with things just generally better. Traffic, airports,
Right.
Poor drivers,
Holiday shopping.
Shopping, that, potentially, you aren't going to be able to find that present you wanted to get to somebody. Or because you thought you were going to get some money come in, you thought that you were going to be able to maybe buy that present that you're not actually able to spend the money on.
Right.
Okay. So, and we see that sometimes where there's an expectation of wanting this, and then, the conversation of, here we go again, finances are in this, or, my job expects me to work late and I'm not able to take the time off I want. It's school vacation time and those kind of things. Planning ahead is nice to say, but it's not always the most realistic,
Right.
Given that there are so many possibilities, But if you know some triggers and so we said you're taking care of yourself, and then how you start to become triggered in the past. So again, that where it's harder for folks that don't have as much experience in knowing themselves is that first paying attention. I notice that my husband doesn't do so well in traffic after work, but on the weekends he's fine.
Right.
So he's just tired, right? I notice that when I start to get stressed, I get a tick in my eye, So what are your body triggers? What are some things that that start to indicate that you might not be doing well? And then what's happened in the past? And once things happen, if you are noticing it, trying to take the time to take a pause. Excusing yourself to go to the loo is a great reason. I need to go take a walk. I'm going to go outside. You know what? I think it's really beautiful out. I'm going to go outside. Or I'm going to think about something. And you can always leave somewhere and say, why is my heart beating a little bit faster? Why are my palms sweaty? Why am I pressed against a wall? And being able to take that little bit of space and then make a decision to say, okay, yes, this is what I want, or no, this isn't what I want. And then resetting that.
Right. And in talking about triggers, for those who are deployed, maybe for the first time during the holidays, and they're in a completely new environment with a new schedule, with all new people, and there might be new emotions arising or new triggers that they don't understand. What is your advice for kind of navigating why you're feeling a certain way, finding the root of that problem when you're in a completely new environment?
Mm-hmm. Deployment has a lot of loss that I think we don't talk about, and grief.
Right.
That these are held as socially sacred times where we spin around them. It's October and we're already seeing Christmas holiday decorations, right? So there's this immense cultural spin up. TV shows and stations take entire months where they just show movies about, being together and this expectation. So when we're not able to meet that expectation, there should be grief. It's reasonable that there is sorrow and grief. And if it was or wasn't under your control, how you might feel about that might be even more exacerbated because you're not your own agent, which is not something that as Americans we take very well because we laud our ability to have independent choice. So I have done this great thing, I serve our country, and in that I am not doing this thing that I want in the way that I want it. And that's absolutely true. And that's part of the sacrifice we talk about in our military members. When you're in a deployed location and you're feeling those emotions, we talked about the grace to give ourselves. Other folks around us, talk to your other military members. There are places to go to. If you're spiritual, this is a spiritual time for many individuals, and going to the chaplain or going to a place where you worship or doing in whatever that looks like. Connecting back to that higher purpose sometimes really gives a lot of balance to it, that you're celebrating these special times with the root of what it's all about, if that's Christianity, or if it is even I am spiritual but non-religious, finding the world around myself is really important. Mm-hmm. So even just taking a walk and feeling connected, I can say, all right, well, here's a way that I'm not, I sense disappointment, but I can still see awe. And I can still see beauty. And so if those are the things that are important to me in my spiritual view, then finding your spiritual view and how you still find those moments of inspiration.
And you kind of talked about this. You said that sometimes it's impossible to plan ahead. It's just you can't prepare for what you don't know. What can we do to plan ahead the best we can when it comes to finances, travel, your time? What's the best way to prepare now or in the upcoming month for the holidays in November and December?
I really like to plan backwards. That's like my number one thing.
Right.
First, I find my goal. What's my goal? And I remember when I got married, I had made sure that I wrote down what my goal was for our wedding ceremony. And I had my husband who thought I was a little hokey while I did it. And it was, we wanted to be surrounded by family and friends in a close space with cheeseburgers. Okay. And as they tried to get us to have foofy food, and I just didn't like it, and we opened back up that book, and we saw that cheeseburgers were really important. And we said to the caterer, do you serve cheeseburgers? And they said, yes, we do. And I said, well, that's what I would like for my wedding. I would like cheeseburgers. And we had a great time. And it was everything we wanted because we had that vision. And it was a realistic vision. It wasn't, I want to get married on, reasonably on top of the Eiffel Tower, with 400 people and, all this stuff. So reasonably, what can you afford? So what do you want? What's your vision? And I gave a couple examples before. I want to make sure that I am celebrating a day, remembering what's important for me. Okay, so if those are your two goals, I want to make sure that my child feels like they were heard by Santa, if that's the thing. Okay. What does that really look like? How much can you afford? So if that's my goal, now you're going to have that conversation with your child. What do you want? And there's always going to be something that you cannot afford. There is always the Lamborghini. Hey, get me that. Right. Get me something where you're like, that's nice. It's nice to dream big. Have realistic expectations and then say, okay, when do I need to get this by? How much money do I need to have? What does that look like? And then don't push it off. Say, all right, if I know my budget is I'm going to spend X amount of dollars, if you stretch that out, that becomes less stressful. Then if you if that is a stress, how can I stretch my budget by taking advantage of sales, by taking advantage of some of the food programs that are around, by taking advantage of other things collectively? You might want to think about your schedule. So if you want to be with family, if that's an important part, how early do you need to leave? So looking a little bit more, let's say you're flying somewhere, to get your plane ticket, to make sure you're not the last one. So not delaying things is really important. Being able to say, here's my timeline and here's really what I want ideally. And having space to say that these things aren't necessarily going to happen. I want to have a meal. Okay. What does that meal need to be? Does that meal need to be a prime rib? Does that need to be, something that has all these different pieces of it, perhaps? Or does it need to be something your family loves and to be together? Can other people bring pieces of it and bring their food in, and you guys can have? So that's a good, different way where you can still meet expectations. You can also stretch dollars, and then how you can kind of make those things together. How are you going to protect your, as we talked about, emotional well-being? How are you going to take care of that sleep? And as you look at all those things, when you see what's important to you, how do you get there, and then how do you employ them? So it's not, when you look at your plans, it is really complicated in all the different ways to make it successful, and that's why planning is really important.
Right.
Pushing things off usually makes things harder.
Right.
And having realistic expectations.
And setting those goals now, or setting those goals as soon as you can, and then setting a realistic plan is, from what I understand, just
Correct.
Prioritizing what is most important to you, seeing how you can make it work, maybe working with your partner or whoever that you do it with, and setting that realistic plan and realistic expectations.
Yeah, and sometimes the simplest things are the things that we find absolutely the most joyous.
Right.
Because the only thing you want to get out of it is time together. Right. Whatever that looks like. And if that is a child scrolling on a phone, like sometimes that is just what it is. Right. And they're decompressing too. Sometimes it is playing a game or making decorations. We had I enjoyed this tradition we have at my house where we take pieces of colored paper and I cut them out to some shape, either a bird or an acorn or something fall themed. And then I give a couple of them to everybody at the table and we write down what we're thankful for on them. And then we go around the table and we just say what we're thankful for. Yeah. So everyone has to come up with just like 3 things. And then I tape them on a door. And throughout the beginning of the holidays, I have this thing where I can see and remember, and I am hokey enough that I have saved them all. And so it has my daughter's little kid signatures and words and how she used to write and what was important to her. And I have family members who are no longer with us and what they thought about it and what was important to them and kind of reliving those moments. And it costs no money. Mm-hmm. It's very inexpensive. It's colored paper, and it takes 5 minutes out, and we all, take a moment to stop and be present. And so for me, that simple tradition is the most important part of the meal. My husband loves to make the turkey and watch everybody eat it and all the effort he's put in and really watch us eat. That's his favorite part. And so knowing that we all have different things and it's not of monetary value. And it's the joy and the anticipation for my daughter. It's not necessarily the presents. It's all the time together that she really likes. And reminding ourselves that these traditions are from simple starts, and that there is joy in those things.
And when you're in a family unit, like you said, finding out what's important to every member and then making sure you can all incorporate it and not put those blinders on to trying to plan everything and take control of the whole situation. Releasing some of that control and finding input from everyone that you're with during the holidays, I think will help with a lot of stressors as well.
Yeah, I like how you said that, getting people's input. They then become part of the tradition, and they become part of the pieces. When one when there's too much overall control, then it's showing up somewhere in not having that ownership. And again, we talked about independence and being able to have our own imprint on it.
Right.
When we all put in a little bit, then it's ours.
Right. And I will be stealing that tradition of the writing down what you're thankful for. I think that's beautiful. And I like how you keep it up at the beginning of the holidays, because that reminder, I think, is very helpful when you're feeling those emotions or you're feeling overwhelmed. Just remembering what you're grateful for and why you do what you do. And I think that gratitude, even if you're deployed or you're here, is something that can help us all. So going back to balancing, setting realistic expectations, but still getting everything done that you need to get done in this short period of time of the holidays. What do you suggest for deployers who might be away for the first time or just away for the holidays and is responsible for things such as buying their children gifts or usually plans the meal or decorates, and they aren't able to do that, at least not to the capacity that they were when they're home? How do they not feel guilty, or how do they kind of balance what they need to do and be able to handle their emotions in that way?
Mm-hmm. We talk about deployment as an opportunity for growth, both for members and for families. Mm-hmm. When you prepare, and we do this big, every branch, we pre-deployment have yellow ribbons, we do family education, we do member education, and all these kind of things about what you're going to need to do. You're going to need to set your employer up, you're going to need to take care of your car, you're going to need to do all these very practical things.
Right.
And some of them are holiday traditions.
Right.
And how that next person might want it to be different, or they need to adapt to make it right. They might make changes. Changes are good.
Yeah.
You know, it might be, we talked about Christmas, white lights instead of colored lights, or vice versa.
Right.
Like you like white lights, and every year, and now all of a sudden, you know, you're away, and your family says, we're going to put on colored lights. And you know what? You can be like, well, that's not my Christmas tree. Yeah. But I'm glad without me there, you've had a chance to spread some wings and try something.
Right.
You know, understanding that things are not going to be the same without you. It will never, ever be the same if all those things are there. It's not the same every year.
Right.
You know, from year to year, things change, even with the same people, because of your growth and the things that happen. So giving guidance when asked, or offering, and then if received, is always nice. However, if your advice is not welcome, to understand it's okay that they don't take that advice. Mm-hmm. So, yes, thank you for letting me know that. However, I know where the colored lights are, and I'm going to put up the colored lights. Okay. And knowing that's perfectly fine. The beauty of watching your family flourish without you can be one of the biggest mixed emotions we have.
Right.
You know, they don't need me potentially for those things. But is that what you want your family to need you, or do you want your family to be successful and want you and love you? So although things are easier when you're there and they can get by, they like to have you. And having those sort of good conversations and being honest with your family too. I really miss you guys, but I'm really proud of what you're doing, and being able to maintain these open conversations with how they're doing things differently, and watch. And they're equally proud of you. Wow, this must be really hard for you to be away. I can't imagine how difficult this is for you, but we love you and we miss you, and we're honoring you here. And then everyone on each side is taking space to support each other and really tell them what's important.
That's a great advice. And going into my next question, one of the final questions, is how important is communication in reducing stress and setting those boundaries? And how do we go about that, either at home or deployed? Communicating what we need and what our boundaries are, and with your family, with your workplace, with your friends. What's your best advice for that?
communication is an art and a skill.
Right.
And it is not inherent, and we are not born on level playing fields. So that some people are going to need different work to do to get good at it. Some people are going to have baggage they carry that you can't see through generational trauma. Some people are going to have all these things they carry with them. Some people are going to be really good at it. Some people are just not going to care.
Right.
And knowing yourself and then being able to evaluate others. So understanding that perhaps someone you love isn't a talker about that kind of stuff, and that tends to shut them down. That doesn't mean they don't want to hear you. Or understanding that people don't actually like to be told how they feel. It's kind of good, you know, like, you're feeling this way. Am I though?
Right.
You know, so getting that education about yourself, and we talk about, like, you know, most people have taken Myers-Briggs tests and can do that, you know, or we've done it in like 4 lenses or flags, or where they have the pared down personality tests or temperament intelligence, and what draws you and what kind of things, how do you look at the world? Most people aren't evaluating their decisions and communications on you. You know, we're coming from the perspective that I am the most important thing, but I'm not talking to you as much as you think that I am. You know, it is, in a normal person, I mean, it's my job to listen to you and answer. However, in a normal conversation, the guy didn't cut you off because he doesn't think that you're important.
Right.
He probably cut you off, like, maybe because his kid got hurt at school, or he's late for an appointment, or let's say he's just, you know, angry about something else. Like, there's a myriad of reasons why someone could be a jerky driver, right?
Right.
The fact that they thought about you is probably minuscule. So what that other person is coming from, being able to communicate where you are, is the big piece. You did this. I feel this way. That's true. That's not creating anything. It's not blaming anything. It's just putting it out there. And so owning your emotions and being frank about them without connecting them to someone else. This was the action. This is how I feel. So there's that one part, knowing your boundaries. We talked a little bit about that. Mm-hmm. And when there are potential generational trauma, or wherever, if you were in a dysfunctional family, over closeness, you can be, someone doesn't have a boundary to stop them. They might never have been taught that. So learning how those boundaries are, or not knowing when to stop. You could be always overstepping someone's boundaries and not knowing because you never were modeled it.
Right.
So doing a lot of self-education is really important, both for yourself and someone else. Listening is important. Is a third piece for me, is the listening, where there was a class, and I forget who did it. I think it, I forget the platform it was on, but it was, they have a tile, and as signifying the floor.
Okay.
I have the floor. I'm going to talk to you. I have the tile in my hand. When it's your time to talk, I hand you the tile. You reiterate what I said until it's correct, and then you may go back, so that it stops reactionary answering, where you have to reiterate someone says. When you put food on my plate, I feel I don't have autonomy over my body, and I feel like I'm being pushed on, and I don't like it. And because food pushing is a thing. Let's say you have dietary restrictions that you're following, and someone's like, don't worry about it. It's just starch. Put it on your plate, right? Or I don't actually like that, and someone just loads you up. Right. Or I'm not eating sweets, but I'm going to bring over sweets. Why are they doing that? Okay, when I tell you I'm not eating this and you bring this over, I feel like you don't listen to me. So then the receiver would have to say, I hear that you feel I don't listen to you. However, I am bringing this over because I am doing service for you and giving you a gift, and I think that you should want that, and that should be received warmly because that's how I feel about gifts. Okay, well, now I get where you're coming from, but I still don't want it.
Right.
Okay? So then you're having that open conversation with someone. What gives you does not mean you need to take it. Like, if you don't want those mashed potatoes, don't eat them. Just because they're there, there is that expectation that you eat everything on your plate. So they're working in social expectations that I give you a gift and now you have to use it. That's not true. I've told you that I'm not. So knowing those healthy boundaries, and when I say talking, yelling also isn't communication.
Right.
Yelling is emotions taking over words. And it's hard to listen when your body is starting to feel anxiety. Mm-hmm. Am I being threatened? What is this? Why am I being attacked? And not cognitively listening to the words, it's more reactionary.
Right.
So the point of it is never to get to a resolution. The point of it is to release these negative emotions. And if you're not into that, don't participate.
Right.
It's okay for someone to yell at you and say, no, thank you, and to leave. Because someone's yelling does not mean that you need to allow that. It does not mean because someone speaks down to you, I don't get spoken to like that is an answer I've absolutely given people. I'm sorry you think that's okay to talk to me that way. It is not. And then I think we're done and leaving. And that's okay too,
right.
Because you're leaving with self-respect. And you've been very clear about it, and you've done it in a way that they can take back with them. Whether or not they use it or not is not your responsibility. Right. So taking away the feeling that you are responsible for others' behaviors in that communication. Are you being clear? Are you stating it? The reasons why, your pieces of it? Are you listening back to hear what they're saying and not to answer?
Right, and not being defensive. Yep. Right off the bat, and hearing to listen, not hearing to respond. I think that's a big thing that will help communication during this time.
Yeah.
Lastly, do you have any resources, maybe books or websites or different things that our listeners can go to if they want to learn more about this or are struggling and they need some help?
Military OneSource is a fantastic resource. And what I like about it is that it is almost something you can get lost in, because it is do I want to use the library, the MWR free library, and get audiobooks or get something sent to me? Do I want to talk to a counselor? Do I want to talk to a military family life consultant and help me do planning? Like, am I getting all the things? Can I throw this against the wall with somebody and just have them say, like, did I catch all that stuff? Or all the things, like, I think I'm okay. But can you just validate that? And then that's that sort of friend, right? Okay. There is a ton of different web apps that are available that you can find through there as well to talk about setting yourself up properly, like meditation, deep breathing. So, when we talk about, snipers being really good at their jobs, right? We want them. What do? They breathe.
Right.
They control their breathing. They control their emotions and how they go. How do you get your limbic system to relax? And so if you know that you're going to be going into something beyond that, how do you fall asleep? How do you take care of and eat healthy? So all those kind of resources on every military installation. There are psychological health, there's medical, there's chaplains, there's military family readiness, and then the VA has an enormous amount of resources, whether you are recently transitioned, whether you are still in the military and still have veteran status. It really is reach out and ask.
Well, thank you so much for that generous list of resources. Do you have any final words about holiday resiliency or anything else you want to add before we end the episode?
I would like to wish everyone a wonderful holiday season filled with love in the way that they envision it to be gratifying.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us. I think this was a great conversation.
Thank you very much.